Ralph Vacchiano joins us here on Big Board Sports. Good morning, Ralph. How are you?
Good, Roger. How you doing?
I'm good, Ralph. And yeah, I mean, I said to my partner Zach when the news came out yesterday that the Giants were releasing Victor Cruz. It didn't surprise me, but it kind of saddened me because I was a big Victor Cruz fan.
Yeah, I think anybody who knew him or watched him over the years felt exactly the same way. The writing was on the wall. We all knew it was, at the very least, maybe they would offer him a pay cut, but it was almost 90% that they weren't going to do that. His skills had declined. His production didn't match the value. But, as much as, and I wrote this morning for SNY.TV, that as much as your heart tugs at you to say, bring him back and let him finish his career here, or give fans one more thrill, it just doesn't work that way anymore in sports, especially in a salary cap era. You have to think reasonably. You have to think financially. And, he didn't make any sense. But it is sad because he was sort of almost like a rocket ship to stardom, and was this guy who very briefly was a great, great player for the Giants, but left such a big mark on the franchise and the fans that I think people are going to remember him as up there with many of the great Giants from this era.
And when you're undrafted and you roll into camp, what are the chances of you actually making that team? I don't think they're very good.
No, even for players that shine in training camp, it's probably very low that they'll do more than just make the roster. When you think, this is a kid who came in, he wasn't just undrafted. He was undrafted and coming in out of UMass, not exactly a place known for football, and he had basically been kicked off the team in UMass. So there are plenty of times where his career had derailed. And he comes into camp and he's a total nobody. He's making a few plays and catching some eyes, and he looks like a guy that, well, maybe they'll stash on the practice squad or something. And of course, then he has that big explosion against the Jets in the preseason. He ends up on injured reserve as a rookie. And at that point, you have to think, okay, well, this is what happens with these guys. They come in, they get a taste of the NFL, they get hurt, they're never heard from again. And if you remember his big breakout year in 2011, he didn't start right away. It was like week 3 before he really got a significant role in the offense and just exploded. I think it was against the Eagles, and didn't become a good receiver, put up numbers that we had never seen a Giants receiver put up before. So the odds of what he did had to be astronomical. Certainly at the start of training camp in 2010, he would not have been on my list of guys to even make the team.
No, there's no question, and I've enjoyed covering him, watching him, and he will go down as a fan favorite, and I'm sure down the road in the Ring of Honor, and will be considered one of the all-time greats to wear the Giants uniform. How about Jennings? That didn't surprise me either, with the emergence of Paul Jenkins or Perkins right behind him last year, and then I think at the end Perkins actually got more playing time than Jennings, so that move didn't surprise me either.
No, that was definitely one we could see coming as well. Running back, a lot like slot receiver, maybe even more so, is a young man's position. If you build a good offensive line, you can put an average 24, 25-year-old behind that line and probably come up with 1,000 yards. Rashad Jennings is 32. Running backs tend to fall off the cliff in terms of production at age 30. He didn't have a lot of mileage on his body because he was never really the full-time back anywhere, so he lasted a little bit longer. But the Giants weren't going to commit any money to a guy hitting 32 who had never topped 800 and something yards when they had a young running back they like with a high ceiling. They'll probably bring in a veteran back to share some time with him, but Rashad Jennings just wasn't going to be worth it. He over 3 years there, he was one of the more likable guys in that room, a leader in that room, one of the hardest workers on the team, but I think he barely topped 2,000 yards total in 3 seasons. It just isn't going to cut it when you're going to have to make, close to $1 million a year.
Ralph, a hypothetical question from me, and this is going to be unfair, but if the Giants had just one thing to take care of this offseason, what would they prioritize? Would it be the offensive line? Would it be adding a tight end, bringing back JPP? If they could address just one thing, and obviously they're trying to cover more than that, but what is 1A on that priority list?
That's a tough one to answer because, if you prioritize the offensive line, you end up losing Jason Pierre-Paul. And if you go all in on Jason Pierre-Paul and go back with the same line, the offense is just going to be the same mess. I would guess, if they were just going to pick one place, it would be the offensive line because they do have a lot of star players on defense now, so they can get by with someone other than Jason Pierre-Paul. I totally expect them to try and sign Jason Pierre-Paul. It's going to be sort of priority 1 and 1A for them. They'll try to re-sign him, then go after some offensive linemen. But they know their biggest question mark going into next season is going to be that offensive line. They've got basically a 3-year window left with Eli Manning. They need to protect him. They need to start generating a running game. If you look at last season, they obviously had a championship defense. If they could have done, they won 11 games with the 26th ranked offense in the league. If they could have just been average on offense, they might have been, 13-3, had a home playoff game or 2 home playoff games. A lot of things could have been different if they could have just been okay instead of terrible. And all that's going to come down to the offensive line.
We're talking with Ralph Vacchiano, NFL insider for SNY, covers the Giants and has for many years, but now responsible for covering Gang Green, and we are the home for Jets football here in the Capital Region, 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio. So, Ralph, let me ask you, it'd be pretty easy, right, what their number one priority is. Who's going to be the quarterback in September? Who's going to be under center for the Jets? And when are we going to know the answer to that question?
Well, that's a good question, too. We're going to know the answer in stages, I think. We'll see the first week of free agency, which begins March 9th. If they are in the market for a quarterback there, we'll find out pretty quickly because it has to be their number one priority. If they don't do anything there, you can be rest assured that they will be thinking about using the number 6 overall pick on a quarterback. So then you start looking at the quarterbacks in the draft. I don't believe they're going to go into next season with Bryce Petty or Christian Hackenberg as their guy. So I think you can rule that out right away. The question just is, are they going to fall in love with a guy in the draft, or do they go for a mid-level free agent? I kind of tend to think they're going to at least look at free agency. Guys like Mike Glennon is the name that comes up over and over again with the Jets. He's the backup in Tampa, was a starter his first couple of years there, then kind of got run out of a job when Lovie Smith took over that franchise, and they drafted Jameis Winston 1 overall. A lot of scouts like his arm. The Jets tried to acquire him a couple of years ago. I think he's probably the favorite. The only question with him is, the quarterback market can be crazy. There aren't a lot of good ones out there, and we all saw how much Brock Osweiler got last year when it was just the Houston Texans versus the Denver Broncos, and he got a ridiculous deal. I don't know that the Jets have the desire to give that much money or the cap room to give that much money. But I think they'll at least give it a look and see if there's any bargain to be had there.
And, Ralph, outside of Deshaun Watson, I don't really see that this draft coming up is deep at the quarterback position.
No, and it's not at the moment. There's a few that people like. The kid who's the Notre Dame quarterback, his name escapes me at the moment. Trubisky, the North Carolina quarterback, is a guy that gets mentioned a lot with the Jets. I've certainly heard from scouts who tell me that, there's no top 10 quarterback in this draft. I've heard from others that think, one of them, maybe could go. The thing with quarterbacks is the market develops late and people go crazy. Last year at this time, a lot of people outside of the league couldn't have picked Jared Goff or especially Carson Wentz out of the lineup and never thought of them as being the number 1 and number 2 pick. All of a sudden, teams got desperate for quarterbacks. They fell in love with these guys. They started trading up. And before you know it, you had the 1 and 2 pick of the draft being quarterbacks that months earlier nobody was crazy about. So certainly a good combine performance, a good pro day in March could get teams excited about any of those 3. Right now, there's not a lot of buzz on them, but I wouldn't be surprised. Franchise quarterbacks don't come around often. All it takes is one person to really fall in love, and suddenly you've got a top 5 pick.
And the other thing on the Jets list for me is Darrelle Revis. Is he coming back? Is he a cornerback? Is he a safety? What are they going to do with Revis?
Well, I don't think he's coming back as a cornerback. I think there's a chance he'll come back as a safety. I don't think it's a good chance. He would have to take a significant pay cut, and his salary still would be pretty high. And here's the thing about Darrelle Revis and pay cuts. He doesn't take them often. He's a guy who has been known to go after the most money possible. He's been brilliant in that regard, structuring his contracts and holdouts and whatever else to maximize his value. So it's not like if the Jets come to him and I think they're going to have to cut $9-10 million off his salary. I don't know that he's going to do that. He might say, you know what, you'll have to release me. I'll get my guaranteed money and I'll go elsewhere and add on to that. He's pretty smart about that, and he's intent on continuing his career. So I'm not sure there's going to be a match. If there is, though, he'll be a safety instead of a corner. I don't think they want him to come back as a cornerback.
Ralph Vacchiano, I'm sure will be back in touch as we've got a busy off season for both the Giants and Jets. Key decisions to be made by both teams, and we appreciate you joining us for a few minutes here in Albany.